All right, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing time here at the conference so far. Next up, we have a panel titled How AI is Changing Threat Detection and Response. Please join me in welcoming our panelists to the virtual stage. All right, welcome everyone. We're so excited to have this amazing group here to discuss this topic with us. So first, let's kick it off by going around the virtual room and doing a quick round of introductions. So Ravi, would you like to kick us off?
Hi, this is Rahmani, Chief Information Security Officer with Quest Diagnostics. Yeah, as part of my role, I manage security, risk, governance, and compliance for all of Quest Diagnostics. That's located in the United States as well as globally. Happy to be part of this panel today.
Happy to have you. Sahar. Oh, I believe you're on mute.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sahar. I am lead of Cybersecurity AI team and Distinguished Technologies at Royal Bank of Canada. I'm leading a team of data scientists, machine learning engineer, and data engineers to bring AI and big data analytics at RBC. And I'm really happy and excited about this time.
Awesome. We're really happy to have you. Lital.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Lital, and I'm Chief Marketing Officer and Security Evangelist at Hunters. Hunters is an open XDR, extended detection and response. We help companies connect all the telemetry they have in their environment and actively use it to detect attacks and provide information that provide complete view of what is going on in terms of cyber attacks.
Very important work. Thank you. And Charlie.
Hi, Patrika. Hi, everyone. Really excited to be here. I'm Charlie Greenbacker, head of federal at Snorkel AI. Snorkel AI is a Palo Alto-based startup spun out of the Stanford AI Lab in 2019. Our enterprise software platform enables non-technical subject matter experts to programmatically label massive amounts of machine learning training data in a matter of hours without requiring armies of outsourced labelers spending months painstakingly labeling data by hand. The result is a far more secure, scalable, iterative, and auditable approach to AI application development, proven to be up to 45 times faster in commercial case studies, producing machine learning models with the same or better accuracy. Snorkel's technology is currently used by leading AI/ML organizations like Google, Apple, Intel Corporation, as well as large enterprise customers across various industries and the federal government. We also support a wide variety of cyber use cases, including network traffic analysis for application fingerprinting, attack or anomaly detection, and policy enforcement. Thank you.
Wow, excited to have you here. And Tim.
Hello, I'm the head of security for JetBlue Airways. I've been here about a year and a half. And before that, 12 years, the head of security for a company called Intersections Identity Guard Program. And then military and government service before that.
Awesome. Very excited to have you joining us today. So we've got some great panelists here with some amazing perspectives to share. So I think we'll go ahead and get into our questions. So our first question is, there is a lot of hype around AI. How do you think about its utility in the cybersecurity function? So I know everyone's going to have thoughts on this, but Tim, let's stick with you and kick it off.
Well, first off, I do translate or use a different acronym definition for AI. So I use augmented intelligence specifically because I had some prior experience and I wanted to stay away from the hype and focus in on the utility. So the utility for me and the way I look at it is specifically to overcome cognitive biases or human limitations that we have today. And so if we can do this to do things like react faster or to deal with large amounts of data that we're just unable to handle, these are the areas that I'm interested in. And, obviously automation specifically.
Very interesting. Charlie, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Tons of hype. I would say just like there was a lot of hype around the web in the mid 90s, right? Huge predictions on what the web would enable and how it was going to transform society. Those predictions, perhaps took a lot longer than expected and didn't come out the same way that everyone thought. But I don't think anyone could argue that the web hasn't transformed a society in big ways. And I think we're sort of in that same stage now with AI and machine learning. Yes, way overhyped. Yes, tons of promises. Yes, a huge sort of valley of death to cross, where we go from those expectations to the realities of what it takes to operationalize this technology. But just like we're seeing AI being baked into virtually every piece of modern software now in ways that we don't even really understand, from the Gmail spam filter to the Netflix recommendation engine to Waze saving you 15 minutes in traffic. We're going to see that sort of pervade across all verticals. In cyber, it's really hard, to see these success stories. I think a lot of it comes from the availability of training data. In most domains, if you have someone that wants to develop skill sets or develop, applications or capabilities, the first thing they go to is, where can I get training data to sink my teeth into, understand this domain, try some things out. And, you'd be hard pressed to find lots of really, high quality labeled training data in the public domain for people to develop tools in cyber. It's not like companies are getting hacked and then releasing 2 years worth of network logs for researchers to play around with. That's just not going to happen, because it's either way too sensitive, way too embarrassing, or there's just no compelling reason to do that. So I think in the cyber domain, the lack of availability of training data, whether internal to an organization or external for researchers, is one of the big reasons why we're not seeing this sort of breakthrough technology yet.
Very interesting. Lital, I'd love to get your perspective from a marketing side.
Oh, yeah. So I definitely agree with Tim. Too much hype. And at the end of the day, it's about augmenting decision making. So I think that the anxiety around AI is that it's going to eventually replace the SOC analyst. It will replace people. This is not going to happen. I mean, we've seen it across the board in consumer apps, that at the end of the day, it helps us save time and do the things that we as human beings are not so good in doing, like sifting through a lot of data and doing some things that the machine is just better than us. So at the end of the day, in security, it will help eliminate a lot of silos. It will help cut the time for decision making. The decision making will happen through human beings. So it is definitely an augmentation and not a replacement of our human work.
Thank you. And Sahar, from an academia perspective, are you agreeing, or what do you think?
Yeah, I've seen both academia version and productionization version. In RBC, we took a different approach. We paired the data scientists with academic background with the cybersecurity experts to bring AI and ML view, machine learning view to cybersecurity. And yes, it's not going to replace SOC analysts. Yes, it's not going to replace any of the analysts or like human aspect, but like what AI going to do, and like we applied in our RBC and we see the results, is to reduce the work of analysts and like help them to work on more interesting incidents rather than so many lots of incidents that might be false positive or not interested. So it helps them to decision faster. So we tell them, okay, these are, instead of like looking at everywhere, these 5 positions or these 5 computers are the most probable ones, just go look at them, right? Or these are the most probable incidents, just go like, or more important incidents, just go analyze them, those incidents. So that's how we are looking at AI, rather than like, oh, it's something, I would say magical, going to replace everybody. No, it's going to help our analysts, it's going to help SOC, it's going to identity access management teams, cyber operation teams to do their job better and be working on more meaningful events rather than lots of data that might bore them or tire them.
Definitely. I'm seeing a recurring theme here about, what's augmented versus artificial intelligence. So very exciting to hear these perspectives. And Ravi, from a healthcare and life sciences perspective, what are you seeing?
Yeah, so I have to agree with that, augmented intelligence. So I see that as a human-centered artificial intelligence, right? It has to be human-centric. So what I mean by that is, humans analyze through logic and reasoning. So AI is a model, basically, and for the most part, it's unbiased, even though I'm part of a group that's evaluating biases in AI. For the most part, it's the algorithms and the models are unbiased, and it's used widely now, as Charlie was pointing out, especially in the healthcare industry where there is imaging. Physicians are overworked, and they have to continuously read the images. And there is a human aspect. When you're tired, you might miss something. That's number one. Number two, there are new ways to find things, not clearly from a human eye perspective. So where AI comes into picture is by means of ingesting a lot of data and learning through machine learning processes, AI will help reading images where it won't be missing the things human will miss. So that's where I think AI is going to provide most bang for the buck, per se, as one of the use cases.
Excellent. And that's actually a great segue into our next question. What sort of threats do you see having the greatest potential for AI to make a difference? And Ravi's already given us an example, but I would love to start with Sahar on this. This is a great question.
So you can play, like AI can play a role in different areas of the cybersecurity, from identity access management, cyber risk, third-party engagement, and even like the cyber events like phishing or like cyber attacks that leads to fraudulent activity. But in my opinion, one of the biggest things that recently needs AI help is user entity behavior analytics, like insider threat. So especially in big, large companies, identifying insider threat needs lots of big data analytics, lots of AI models, lots of behavior analytics models. It's just because of the sheer number of events and data happening on those companies. There are so many successful results of application of AI in this field, and so many need of it. You see in news every day at this point, like multiple times every day, that insider threat risk becoming more and more important, and AI can make it different. Like in next few years, you will see that AI in UVA analysis will be one of the most important detection techniques we are going to use.
Very interesting. Thank you. Ravi, are you seeing the same thing in healthcare, or what do you see?
Yeah, I agree with Sahar, where UEBA is one of the areas for insider threat. But let's go back and think about the business angle, right? We have collected tons and tons of data now. Data is the new oil. It's all unstructured. Social media is creating tons of data, and it's all sitting there for us to consume. So with that, the sort of threats with the amount of data, it's humanly impossible, as we discussed before. And in this particular case, SOC analysts, right? We have skills shortages, first of all. And second of all, we are bringing in a lot of people and training them as a SOC analyst through the SME programs, subject matter experts program. And they have to manually create a graph to identify the attack surfaces that is correlated with each one of the nodes is not practical. So that's where the machine learning, deep learning, and AI combined will help us address these patterns and map it to a node graph or some kind of a threat graph, and identify if the IP is originating from a foreign country, how is it connected to my network, and where is it originating and where is it spreading, right? So that's one area. And the second area would be AI improving the vulnerability management. We use CVS as scoring methodology, for example, to prioritize it. At the end of the day, the more nodes we have, the more vulnerabilities we will find. But how do we prioritize it? Through the threat landscape. not just by scoring and prioritization by using a scale, that's needed, but going above and beyond that to say, at this point in time, the attacks are happening using RDP protocol. That we know because there are tons of data that's coming through from intelligence saying the DDoS type of attack or a RDP type of an attack is happening. So prioritize among the vulnerabilities, prioritize those using AI and address them efficiently, possibly in real time, will help us secure our environment in real time.
So I'd like to add one thing to what Sahar said, and Sahar, you were dead on, right, with that specific area. You did limit it though to insider threat. But in actuality, there really is no such thing in a sense, right? It's outsiders, once they use an inside account, they become an inside threat. So exactly what you said, but expand it into all threat actors. So what we're trying to do is model behaviors of people who are actually trying to misuse internal accounts, applications, users. And so you need to be able to look at patterns over long periods of time. And so one of the things that we want to bypass are, recency bias, things that, when our analysts are looking at it, they're not taking into account. And I think, COVID threw AI, especially pattern of user behavior, on its head because it all changed and we had to start over. So in a sense, we've got to integrate some of those behaviors prior to COVID along with what's happening right now. And that's very difficult for a human to do in large data sets.
Very interesting perspective there, and interesting to see how it changes across different verticals too. Lital, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most interesting thing would be, and that fits very well with team and Ravi's ideas here, is to be able to put those very low fidelity signals that in every environment we have, when either an insider event happens or anyone that compromises an insider to use it as a way to get into the network. We've seen even with SolarWinds, if we know how FireEye detected it on their network, it was because there was a low fidelity threat through the authentication network that they managed to spend a lot of time and go and investigate what else was related to it. This is something that for most organizations, because of either shortage of skill, not having the time to sift through so much data, it's so hard to see from all the amount of signals that they have. I think the most promising thing that AI can offer us is to put together those low fidelity signals and be able to amplify them in a way that we can see something that is becoming a real threat, other than SOC analysts sifting through so many alerts like they do today. I think this is most promising because at the end of the day, attacks are becoming stealthy more and more. It's hard to see them. They're using tools that we have in our environment. So to Charlie's point about training the model, it's hard because it's the attack surface when it's so vulnerable and everything seems the same, that the norm versus the attack tend to look very similar. So we need to find ways of taking those minute signals and putting them together to form a real incident versus something that is not, and it's just noise.
Excellent point. Thank you. And I think actually that's a great segue. And I'd like to start with Charlie for this next question. What barriers to AI adoption do cybersecurity organizations face? And we'd love to get your examples. Lital has already alluded to some of them, but Charlie.
Yeah, thanks, Patricia. A lot of examples already, right? So I think in cyber, you've got with AI the same challenges as every other domain, except in some ways they're worse, right? So the data sizes are catastrophically large, right? Compared, look at something like YouTube, which stores every single application or user level event that has ever happened on the entire platform. Every click, every like, every watch, every comment, everything. Versus, who's out there storing, in perpetuity, every single event that happens on the network. You just don't, because it's too much data. Labeling that data for training machine learning models requires absolutely deep subject matter expertise, right? Most people can't look at raw NetFlow or PCAP data and say, oh, that's a policy violation, right? So you can't do like crowdsourcing, outsourcing, reCAPTCHA style labeling. That just doesn't work. And like, Tim and Lital were sort of mentioning, the landscape is extremely dynamic, right? Everything is constantly changing. Every network is highly unique. Both the normal traffic patterns are constantly shifting, as well as the tactics of attackers. So many of the traditional approaches to building machine learning applications kind of break down in the cyber domain. That's one of the reasons why our customers that care about network traffic analysis and cyber applications work with us to create training data in an extremely efficient way for their specific networks, their specific applications, their specific use cases, because one size fits all solutions just aren't going to work. And when things are constantly changing, like Tim mentioned COVID, that changed everything everywhere. How long would it take you, once COVID hits, to go and relabel enough data to update a model, right? So if you're doing anything in AI and you're hand labeling training data, that's kind of going the way of the horse and buggy. Especially in cyber, that's never worked because of the reasons we've been talking about. And also tying this back to something that Ravi was mentioning about detecting and eliminating bias and the broader sort of space of trustworthiness and explainability. A lot of these traditional approaches, when you have these additional requirements for explainability and trustworthiness and detecting and eliminating biases in enterprise settings and in government settings, a traditional hand-labeled approach just doesn't work. We've got ways where it's trivial to trace the model output back through the entire process, back to what the subject matter expert has sort of designed the system to solve. So a lot of these sort of barriers have been stymieing the advance of AI and machine learning and cyber for years, but I think we're starting to see some hints of daylight and green shoots.
I love that optimism. That's very exciting. Lital, what's your perspective here?
Well, there are some barriers that start with, expertise in place. The question is, are you like Sahar's team that can afford having in-house AI team? All the way from the data science, data engineering part of it, which is tough, to the training models. I think that's just not enough expertise in place just in the cybersecurity space for that. So then comes vendors that provide some out-of-the-box capabilities, and that will take time for this to mature and for companies to go and adopt, because not everyone can afford their own teams to go and develop their own capabilities in-house, I think.
That's an excellent point. Tim, what's your perspective here?
When you talk about barriers, the first two to come to mind are the ones that we create ourselves based on having too much trust, right? Or too much reliance, or not really being able to identify the assumptions that we make, right? So if cases are kicked off and they're false positives and you're wasting a lot of time for investigations, people are just not going to use it. They're not going to trust it. And they're not going to worry about, trying to diagnose what the real problem is. The other one is, if you get to the point of trying to make automated response and it starts shutting down operations, it's going to be a quick death to that feature of a product. I'm not going to say that it's all like that, but there are definitely mistakes that are made. But once you dig into it, sometimes you can find within the specific products implementations of ML that benefits you in ways that you would have never expected. And so there's bright spots.
Wow, I'm loving this theme of optimism. That's making me feel hopeful. Sahar, how are you feeling?
So the barrier comes in twofold. Like first, like as Charlie mentioned, it like the label data is a problem, and also we cannot rely on label data much because the landscape changes so many times that. Landscape changes so often, so fast that label data within a month, within 2 months, it's just like nothing. Right? And it puts us in the bias, and we have to be very worried about it. There are lots of solutions from data science, AI point of view, how to overcome that problem. But more or less, we have to be very careful about how we use label data. If we don't use label data, we would have false positive problem because there are so many anomalies. So, and then like we put lots of work on psych analysts or like analysts who is like getting those data. So this is some solution that like companies should be smart, should trust it. Like there's a business decision at some point. Should we decide AI team? Should we not decide the results? Like how we want to do it? But then like there is a problem of data storage. Where data are going to be stored? Like there is a privacy issue in this, like privacy concern in different countries, in different area. There's a ingestion concerns, like how we want to ingest them, how the models, we want to develop the models, explainability of the models. So like there are data science, big data problems, there are massive data. How to join those data is a problem, right? When you have thousands and thousands, millions and millions of events, how to join them is a problem. The hardware sometimes is not good enough to to join all those data and events we have. So yeah, there are so many, like there are both sides of the business problem and also like technical problems, but it's getting better. It's getting better and better with cloud, with more cyber, like more technology going to be more and more handy with data, like big data, and then businesses and cybersecurity people becoming more and more aware of how data, how AI works. Like the same, like people here, like 5 years ago, maybe people would think, oh, it's a magic, like we do, like AI would solve all the problems. Now everybody aware it's a hybrid, human and AI going to work together to have a better result. So with those understanding, we will have a bright future in our AI in cybersecurity area, I would say.
Wow, I think this is the most hopeful cybersecurity panel I've ever heard. Ravi, about from healthcare, that's a lot of data, a lot of challenges there. What are you seeing in terms of adoption?
Yeah, not only a lot of data, these are regulated data, right? PHI data, PII data, and PCI data, all regulated, and those are our crown jewels. We can, with the cyber warfare that's going on today, and it will continue for the foreseeable future. AI is one of the vehicles that we are embracing to address those problems. But the question here is, what are the barriers, right? How do we overcome it? I see that in the three areas. I think several of the panelists touched on it, this could be repetitive. The first one I see is the skills shortage, coming back to the skills, whether it's AI or AI for business on cybersecurity. As Charlie pointed out, right? So the second one is building the ground truth. As we know, there is tons of data available, building the ground truth from scratch and making it real. We always say in the AI field where the first AI model is like a baby that's born, right? It takes years, like 2-year-old, 5-year-old, and then maturity, right? It takes years to train the model. And the faster we train the model, there needs to be automation on training, right? So that's another barrier. We need to automate the training to identify any false positives. I think Tim mentioned about sending in a automated message to the end user or anything through AI bot, and having that to stop the production is not a good thing. So training the model with less false positive is a barrier. It comes through skills and usage of the patterns, etc. And we will overcome that. And the business acumen, right? We need to understand in a healthcare field, what is the business requirement? How are we addressing that? So we want to create the baseline using the security, privacy, and compliance requirements, and then implement from a business perspective and move forward.
Excellent, I love that. And speaking of moving forward, that actually leads us into our next question. So do you anticipate AI changing the threat landscape over the next 7 years? And I'm going to start this one off with Lital.
Well, I think this have two sides for it. Basically, on the threat actors part, they're starting to use machine learning and AI on their attacks. They're learning our network vulnerabilities. They're applying all kinds of automated tools. So that's definitely, we're going to see more automation used on the attackers. We already see a lot of it from the network standpoint with bots. We'll see a lot more sophistication coming. So definitely on that side, I also think that we're seeing the adoptions on the industry. So definitely it's going to change it. In what ways? I think we all discussed already the amount of data that each organization is creating every year is exponentially growing. And with that, I think that every 5 years, we completely rewriting the way we need to address this at scale. We've seen the pandemic creating new shift to the cloud, the amount of data that organization like Ravi's organization has just created with Crest Diagnostics and their needs. So I think the need that organizations have for more automation will just rise, and the new technologies will emerge definitely in a scale of 5 to 10 years that we can just think how it's going to be. We probably cannot anticipate where we're going, but we all see how automation is reflected in any aspect of our lives. This is not going away, and this is only growing with the scale of growth of data.
Very exciting. Tim, what's your perspective here?
You know, specifically when you talk about like the threat landscape changing and how AI is going to play into that. I mean, like Lital said, you know, the threat actors are actually going to use it. There's no doubt about that. But they might use it in ways that are not direct attacks, right? Because there's a certain value from deception. And so I think that the attacks themselves are going to get much more complex. You know, what's happening with one hand isn't necessarily happening with the other. And so there's going to be quite a bit of that augments their ability and gives them kind of a force multiplier per se. So there's that going on. There's also obviously a lot of skills that are increasing on both sides of the playing field. And those are the ones that we're most worried about, especially when you talk about being able to take something novel and rapidly turn it into automation. Then we're talking about, you know, a simple something that was learned, and maybe something Kaseya is maybe an example of that, maybe something that was learned, that was pre-packaged and then executed very quickly in a very short period of time to obviously gain a lot of compromises. And that's going to be where, you know, I think where we're going to struggle to respond unless we do embrace automation ourselves.
Interesting. Ravi, what are you thinking there? Yeah,
sure. From a threat landscape, it's already changing. How is it going to change in the next 5 years? I believe the social engineering attacks are going to increase because many people are adopting it. The more people adopt it, that's where the attack is going to be. And phishing attacks, we are seeing it today. It's going to grow beyond emails, right? There are ways to attack using beyond emails through phishing and other areas. And then to my area, as well as other manufacturing units, IT versus OT. So far, we have been concentrating on the IT area. The gas pipeline attack is an example where everybody's eyes opened. A lot of things, right? Even our refrigerators or the doors all have OT component in it. And in my area, we are using testing machines that needs OT component. We need to, how do I isolate them and making sure those are separated and isolated using microsegmentation, etc. And then lastly, about with privacy regulations coming in state by state now, and then implication on data-centric security, right? That is going to be a prime importance in the next 5 years.
Excellent perspective. And Charlie, what are you seeing? I'm hearing a lot about data, so I'm interested to get your perspective here.
Yeah, it's funny, you know, a couple of minutes ago, Patricia, you were commenting on how optimistic everyone sounded, and now we're talking about the threat landscape, and there goes all the optimism. Like
It's an endless
Ravi talked
cycle.
about our refrigerators getting attacked, right? It's nothing sacred, right? I think like Lital and Tim said, increasing use of AI ML based automation by attackers with increasingly more sophisticated capability than what we're used to. Automation's always been a tool used by attackers, whether we're talking about script kiddies or more sophisticated, even state level adversaries. And I think what's interesting in cyber is that there's this asymmetry, right? There's this asymmetric situation where the defenders have to get it right every time just to tie, but the attackers only have to get lucky once in a while to win. So I think this is sort of shaping up to be almost an arms race where both sides are going to be increasingly relying on automation powered by AI to achieve their aims.
Wow, that's a great analogy. Sahar, what do you think about that?
I agree with almost everyone. Like AI is going to be used by threat actors more and more, and like it's just like it's open source and they can use it. The only thing I want to add is securing our AI models from the attacks, because it's going to happen. It's happening, and it's going to happen more and more. With companies rely on AI to detect and protect their information and their clients, threat actors going to focus on attacking those AI models more and more. And like when we are building the models, or we are like using a vendor out-of-box solution, we should be very, very careful about that component, that how attackers can attack them and how we can protect our models basically.
That's excellent. And I think we're ready for the last question here. So I'm going to let's move into this one. How do you expect the relationship between human analysts and AI-driven machines to develop over the next 7 years? So Ravi, let's start with you on this one. I know we've touched on the topic.
Yeah, so we in conclusion, we all agreed that the attack surface is going to increase and the data is going to increase multifold, and there is a skills shortage. Let's combine all those three, right? So that leads to some kind of an automation and some kind of a machine learning implementation that is needed. So that's how we are thinking to implement, and more so from a Sahar mentioned about the NIST framework. I'm thinking identifying the problem and detecting the problem areas should be invested more and concentrated more with AI and human models, because it's all about prevention. We have to be a step ahead of the bad actors. So it's all about investing money in the identity and at the same time protect and respond, right? As Charlie mentioned, it's an asymmetric attack, and eventually we have to face an event. How resilient are we? How can we respond very quickly through our CSIRT plans, communication plans that are already in place, and execute them in an event is the name of the game on this topic.
Thank you for sharing. I heard somebody about to jump in. Who was that?
Oh, that was me. I was just going to say, you asked about the relationship, how it changes. The way I look at ML today, it's like an unproven intern. It's not a prodigy at this point. And so with respect to that relationship, if it surfaces things that are valuable, things that the analysts wouldn't see, then they're going to invest time with it. They're going to invest, more with respect to trust and actually helping to improve the process, or maybe get the right data set, or give it data that they never would have thought of. And so I think that relationship will evolve over time, as long as there's accuracy with which comes out of it.
Excellent point. Sahar, what's your perspective here?
I think there's going to be a mind shift at some point, like from rule-based solutions. This is a rule, like block or unblock, bad or good, to a probability, to gray area, right? Because the AI never can, like, it might say in 10 years, I don't know, like the things changes. But at this point, we just like, as an AI model, just can say, this is this event is probably bad, or this event is probably malicious, right? I can see the probability score is 90% or 70% or 50%. And then that's the role of analysts, to learn and think, okay, this is not, oh, I'm going to block it. I see the event from AI model, I'm going to investigate it. It's the most probable, like, ones I'm going to investigate. And this mind shift from yes or no to being in the gray fuzzy area, it's happening. It's going to happen more and more, because, and that's reality, because AI just can, like, machine learning just can give you probability score, like nothing more. Yes, like at some point we can say, okay, like the model detects very well. Anything above 70% probability, we are going to block it and block it right away and look at it later. But especially in cyber realm, like when we don't have a label data, or we are on anomaly detection realm, we have to rely on analysts and human intervene to think about in probability area and address the events.
No, that's an excellent perspective. Thank you for sharing. Charlie, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like everyone was saying, right, you need to fight fire with fire, and you need to fight automation with automation. You know, humans alone can't operate at the same speed or scale as automated systems. And sort of like Tim was saying, this is where the human machine teaming can help turn the tide. Similarly, Sahar mentioned, you know, combining the raw speed and computing power of machines with the intuition, creativity, and higher order reasoning skills of cybersecurity professionals. I think this is how you give the defenders a winning advantage, or the force multiplier that Tim mentioned. And an analogy, I think, you know, where, you know, tying this all the way back to the first question about hype, and, you know, how the web was overhyped, but still, you know, transformed society. You know, in a similar respect, you know, all of the conversation around autonomous vehicles and self-driving cars is overhyped, right? And everyone's vision is looking at the time where they can, you know, fall asleep in the back seat with, you know, a DVD playing or something like, you know, obviously not DVDs anymore, but, you know, versus the reality of where we are, right? We're still, you know, quite a bit far away from, you know, sleeping in the back of our car while the car drives itself. But think about all of the, you know, very, very advanced driver safety, driver assist capabilities that have been coming online, you know, collision avoidance, right? Not necessarily taking control over from the driver, but helping the driver, right? If the driver, you know, God forbid, has a heart attack and passes out, you know, cars are able to get themselves off of the road and pull over by themselves without just, you know, careening into traffic. So I think in many different domains, including cyber, we'll see more of that, you know, augmented intelligence, human machine teaming, where you can combine the best of both worlds, the best of what the human analyst can deliver, along with the best of what the automated system can deliver.
Excellent. I love that. I love that analogy. That's a great way of thinking about it. Lital.
I think a lot of the way we train and teach people on the job will go towards working with the machine. Well, the machine will improve in terms of explainability, like Sahar said, you know, what's the probability? What does it mean? Give a little bit more insight into the model. I think a way of improving the human-machine interaction and relation is to develop this ability of us human beings to judge the model, to go and see the results that we're seeing. What does it mean? Should we believe it, or should we make our own decision? So I think we see it across the board everywhere. Like, we need to educate our kids about believing things they read on social media. Is it true, or is it fake news? We'll see with deep fake. All of us need to grow up and be suspicious on what we see and put all the question marks. The same will happen across the board. We will kind of like retrain ourselves. I think the same as doctors that are now using robotics and machines instead of doing their own surgery the way it was done. So a lot of the interaction between human beings and those models will be on us, the human beings, to learn how to better use the machines and the tools that we're getting out of the box.
I love that. Very interesting. And so we actually have about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to throw one more question into the ring. The question is, what are you most excited about in this field right now? What really, what's the flying car? What's the thing that you're most excited about seeing? It could be big or small, but I want to ask that to kind of bring us back into that optimistic thing to end us out. So Sahar, let's start with you.
I love the field. So I moved from academic astrophysics background to this field like maybe 5 years ago, less than 5 years ago. And everything about it is still for me super exciting. Like AI going forward, like bringing so many new capabilities and advances. And then we have cybersecurity, which is a challenge, that non-stop challenge. Like anything happens, COVID happens, and the whole new area of the challenge opens for like everybody in the cybersecurity era. And combination of them is just like field of innovation, lots of opportunities, lots of new things, and like it never gets dull, right? Because threat actors always find new things, and we have to come up with the new things. It's just like they change their techniques, we have to change their techniques. We change our techniques, they have to change their techniques. So yeah, like the whole combination of AI and cybersecurity, I love it. It's just like never gets dull.
I love that. Charlie.
Yeah, I think for me, it's experimentation, right? So a lot of the things that we were talking about, all the barriers and the obstacles to building machine learning systems in cyber, I'm really excited about a lot of the work that we're doing across lots of different domains, sort of reducing the barrier to entry and making it easier for organizations to, even experiment and see it, will this dog hunt? Is there something, there here? I've got an idea, I want to try something. If the barrier to entry to quote unquote trying something is, well, we've got to spend, how many person months, right, labeling some data just to figure out, is there anything worthwhile here? If you can reduce that down to, days or even hours, you can get to a no a lot faster, right? And say, nope, we've explored that. That seems like a dead end. Let me try something else. Similar things in science, when you can reduce the amount of time to do experimentation, you can do a lot more experimentation and explore a space a lot further, versus, I think it was Sahar that mentioned, astrophysics. Like often, they measure experiments in decades, right? Only to get a negative result and say, nope, that won't lead to a warp drive. Let's try a different direction, right? If you can reduce that to, orders of magnitude faster, right? Like getting negative results can help steer you back towards a more positive direction.
Love that. Lital.
Yeah, I think that there is a great potential in increasing job satisfaction and happiness in people working in security. I think not a lot of us talk about it, but cybersecurity is a stressful industry to work in. And we all been hearing about, the difficulties, especially through the pandemic, it's hard. If we could have taken some of the mundane, stressful day-to-day work and give tools that people can trust that will take and increase the resilience, and give them tools that can help them go through the tough part of the job and get some more, get them focused on things that really matter. Because I think everybody in cybersecurity into treating real incidents, in helping the organization, in helping the business move forward, and saying more yes instead of no, I think we'll do a lot. So I'm hoping automation and AI and machine learning can help a lot in that area.
That's excellent. Ravi.
Yeah, as a technology innovator, I like 3 areas. One is continuous innovation. Life is not boring. You get challenges by the day and you try to solve it, right? So that's challenging, and you cannot get that in many other fields that I can think of. This is a good area to be in for continuous innovation. And secondly, I moved into the healthcare field, and it's very, very rewarding in the last 18 months seeing, how we enabled testing to all the people around the globe, and more specifically in North America, that helped, real-time evidence to take precautionary measures, as well as, involved with providing data that is useful for many other aspects of the health and life sciences. And thirdly, having fun. Have fun with the job and balance it out.
Love that. Thank you. And finally, Tim.
I have to say, I agree with a lot of the things that were said, specifically in the predictions. I think one of the things, though, that if we hope to have AI actually work as an analyst, really provide value, that's a long ways off. And maybe there'll always be a lack of data to really train the models. But I do think that there's going to be successes that are going to come. And one of them, is like we all struggle with asset management. Lital mentioned something about happier analyst or whatever. If we actually had asset management that was accurate, ML has the possibility to do that, and to do it based on the actual behavior of the device. And so it can quickly change and update and label, and then we can draw inference based on some of that behavior. And then we've been talking about user behavior analytics for so long. I actually think we have a shot at doing this now with, the right ML and algorithms behind it to look at that sustained data and patterns.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much. I know I've learned so much today, and I know our audience has as well. This has been incredible, and I'd love to say a special thank you to all of you for sharing these perspectives with us and, really giving us a lot to look forward to. So thank you again. And for the audience, it's time for you to make your way to your next session. Along the way, make sure you accept your connection request and take some time to check out our amazing exhibits. Thanks so much, and we'll see you around.
Thank you.